This time we're going to be working with a multidimensional array. Sequences are great for programming. You can use them in the form of a string to store a player's name. You can use them in an array to store a list of items in an inventory. But sometimes you need more than just a linear list of things. It needs more dimension. For example, you could represent a chessboard with a 64 element array, but it's more intuitive to work with it as a two-dimensional entity of 8 by 8 elements, 8 columns, 8 rows. Now you can create an array of 2 or 3 or even more dimensions to best fit your needs. We're going to demonstrate that by creating a tic-tac-toe board program. It displays a tic-tac-toe board. It declares X the winner. Now, we could have written this with a one-dimensional array, but in this case we're using a two-dimensional array with 3 columns and 3 rows in order to show the multi-dimensional array part. So let's go ahead and get started. I save my text document to start off. And I'll just call this tic-tac-toe.cpp. Demonstrates multidimensional arrays. Okay, we're only including IOStream this time. We don't need strings because we're going to be working just with characters in this particular example. I do want to specify that I'm using namespace std, and then I begin my main function. Going to set a couple of constants that will store the maximum value for my for the 2 dimensions of my array. Rows and columns both equal to 3. Now I open up, I declare a car variable called board, and this is going to be a 2-dimensional array. So we say that it has rows and columns, and we'll go ahead and define the starting values for it. Okay, our first row has OXO. Our second row has an empty space, X, X, and our third row has X, O, O. Okay, so that's our starting board. We'll go ahead and see out the beginning of it. Now, to display the board, we need to do a nested loop that will go through both rows and both columns. So we start our outside loop for integer I is equal to 0, run as long as I is less than rows, and increment I after each cycle. We nest a loop that will go through our columns. So we have int j equals 0. We want it to run as long as j is less than columns, and each time through, increment j. Inside of this nested loop is where things will actually happen. We'll see out board I, j. Close that for loop, and after each time this loop completes and we move back to the outside loop, we'll need an end line so that it actually skips down to the next column. We'll close that, and now I'll go ahead and have my return 0 just so we can see what this is doing so far. Okay, clear. I'll compile tic-tac-toe and run it. Okay, so that's what we have so far. Now, back in our program, we're going to add to that multidimensional array. So we say x moves to the only empty location left on the board. So we set board 1, row 1, column 0 equal to x. Okay, so we want to print our board again. Now I'm going to cheat. I've already typed my loop once, and I don't really need to type it again. I can just copy and paste it from before because it's exactly the same as what we used before. In more advanced programming, what we would probably do is we would set this loop as a function and just call that function rather than retyping the loop. That's reusing code is almost always a good idea. Okay, so now we'll just print that x wins. They don't do it, but I will, because I know what will happen if I don't. I'll send an end line and return 0. So I save, I compile, and run it. Okay, so you can see our first time through, row 1, column 0 was empty. Second time through, row 1, column 0 is not empty. Now the reason that this is column 0 is because, remember, counting begins at 0. In any programming, counting begins at 0. So this is row 0. This is row 1. This is row 2. Column 0, column 1, column 2. So that is the multidimensional array. And in our next video, we will introduce the word jumble program, where we jumble up a word in an array, and the character has to guess the word in order to win the game. So stay tuned for that.